Hello, playful souls, and welcome to the week of September 17th through the 23rd, 2023. And today we are going to be looking at a really old deck of mine, which is currently out of print, called The Pages of Shusta. And this is a deck that I inherited from my dad. He gave it to me. I didn't inherit it, he gave it to me. And this is going to be an interesting week. This deck is fascinating because of the fact that it is incredibly direct. I love so many things that I see with decks in particular is the nature of how incredibly different each one of them can be for how much they really want to tell you. Some is in the design of it, and others, in other cases, it's, what is it that, you develop relationships with these decks, and this is what you can see. Because so what I would say is that I feel like you develop a relationship with the deck, and there's two aspects of what makes a deck very straightforward. One is that the design of it. So is it allowed to actually tell you direct and bad things, right? Or is it an oracle deck in which everything is kind of taken from a perspective of it's all kind of good? There might be some bad things, but it's not entirely apparent that it is quote unquote bad or negative or difficult or challenging. Everything is kind of taken with a silver lining perspective. The other thing is the relationship that you develop with any given deck, whether it's a tarot deck or an oracle deck. You develop a relationship with that deck and you come to know it. And at this point, since I have so many decks, I haven't even come close to doing all the decks that I have, even just in the weekly forecast that I've been doing. Each of them has a different perspective. So this one is a very direct and straightforward deck. And as you can see, it's got even very volatile colors. Very primary colors to describe each of the levels of what it's talking about. So we're going to see what this has in store. So first we're starting off with Sunday, September 17th through Tuesday, September 19th. Interesting. Okay, so this is the card of, there's zodiacs in this card, and this is the universal zodiac sign. This is the sign of things being made universal in their perspective. So what I would say that this means for the week of, for the days of September 17th through 19th is that there is a universalism to the experience of energy that we're having right now. We're feeling a lot of influence from different things, but it seems to feel mostly benevolent. And we are in the experience of recognizing the connection that we have between all of us without necessarily needing to attribute a reason for it. I think that's really the key. It's let's not have a reason for anything in particular, a reason for why something is happening. Let's just let it happen. Very similar to how you would imagine the sun rises and sets and the moon rises and sets. All right, so next is going to be Wednesday through Thursday, which is the 20th and the 21st. It wants multiple cards, so I'm going to pick multiple cards. Okay, so Wednesday and Thursday. The first we have here is the bees. And the bees are a very benevolent sign in this deck. It's in the blue, which is the spiritual suit of this. And then it is the 8. And the bees usually denote that there is a level of honey and joy and mastery coming into the experience of our lives. And that is what this is really, really emphasizing. So there's a lot of good energy that's coming in on Wednesday and Thursday. Interestingly, there's also the experience of Scorpio. We have on the one hand the busy bees that are signs of a beneficial experience. And then the second aspect is the Scorpio aspect, which is more dedicated and obsessive about things. So what I'm guessing is that in some ways the aspect of the bees in this one is what is really being emphasized, which is why two cards wanted to come out. So what you may find is that you may have a lot of obsessive thoughts on Wednesday or Thursday, and they may be towards something that feels productive and it feels beneficial to you, and you should really go with that because that's in its strength on Wednesday and Thursday. All right, so Friday, Saturday. Oh, lovely. Very innocent feeling. Again, we have the blue, which is the spiritual suit in this exact one, in this deck, and we have this feeling of a little girl with her puppy. I mean, you really can't get any more kind of good feeling with that. It's interesting because in particular, this is the card for an emotional wish being granted, but it's also the card for understanding that the puppy has responsibility and that you at this point need to take responsibility for your role in the things that are lower in your consciousness, right? Depending on how you look at that, the things that are lower in your consciousness could be your villainy, which is I'm doing a course on integrating our inner villains and really like coming to terms and peace with them, knowing that they're working directly against us. Or if you look at it from other perspectives, like Ho'oponopono or A Course in Miracles, the things that are lower in our consciousness are actually everything and everybody, because this is an entire forgiveness play. So depends on how you look at it from that perspective. But Friday and Saturday, this is what we're seeing here, is this thing of an emotional wish being granted, but also the need to understand that your subconscious is affecting your life, and you need to take responsibility for that. And responsibility, like I said, comes in all sorts of different ways. If you're interested in taking a quiz to see what your villain is, I'm going to have that in a link in future weeks. And so that's good. All right, so here's the card for the whole week. Libra. There you go. So the experience of Libra is coming into the fold. It's starting on the 23rd, which is at the end of this week. So what we're seeing is there's this interesting mix of, yes, we're going to get some stuff done. Yes, we have this universal energy. And yes, we have emotional wish granted, but there's a lot of need for balance in that. Like, yes, good things can happen. And yes, work needs to be done as a result of that. Okay, so what is the question that we are asking today? Selena, what's the question we're asking today? Huh? What's the question? What's the question? So the question that we're asking today is, I've been reading in a very interesting book called 4,000 Weeks. And 4,000 Weeks is about how long, if you were to live around 70 years, that's how many weeks you would live in your life. And I have just been absolutely fascinated with this idea because in this book, I was first introduced to the concept and the philosophies of Heidegger. And Heidegger was all about this. He was a philosopher, a German philosopher, who believed that we were not separable from time, that we were, in fact, time. And to me, I felt something click in my body when I heard that. And it was obviously cushioned by a lot of other text, so you may not be feeling that same thing right now, or it may not have the same impact on you as it did on me. But for me, in this last week, I have really gained this vast appreciation for the experience of time as being inseparable from me. That like my life is a finitude. Like I could think about the afterlife. I could think about my past lives. I could think about so many different things, but what I want to do right now is just like enjoy the moment that I have in my life right now. I found it really hard to do that without getting proper sleep recently, with being, exceptionally busy in my practice, things along those lines. And yet I have to keep reminding myself that even those struggles are a part of my finitude, are a part of my life being time, and that time is my being. In some ways, it's given me a view of the dimensional aspect of our reality. So I do a lot of work in dimensional reality in terms of, one of the things that we talk about is, we're sitting in the third dimension and we have a view of the fourth dimension. We have this view of time as something that we can perceive, but not something that we can control. And yet I feel as if in some ways we've majorly misplaced time on the kind of dimensional scale of reality, because what tends to happen when I've been looking at it and studying it and channeling it is that the levels of reality are actually very, very different. This one has a thing at top, but I've done something on this in the past in which, we go from 0 to 6, in which case dimensional reality is expanding exponentially, and then from 6 to 12 is when it starts to diminish again. But the most important aspect of this being that on this bottom layer is this non-changing reality. And on the layer just above it, whether you're expanding it or collapsing it, that layer above it is actually directly about perceiving change. And time, without time, we cannot perceive change. If you were to take a still shot of reality, there would be no change in that still shot, right? So effectively, the experience of change, the experience of the impermanence of life, like the Buddhists say, that is absolutely essential to our experience of life on earth. And time is the, putting together all of those moments in order for us to perceive change, right? So without time as a mechanism, we could not perceive change. So in some ways, it's like this is this unchanging reality. This is the changing reality. And it feels as if time, which isn't even accurate on here on this, because I'm always continually changing and evolving as I understand more and more. This one is time, which is the perception of change, right? So we're always able to perceive what is on the layer above it. So this is an interesting thought. It is just a drop in that wanted to come into this moment, but I thought that it was a good drop in that we could suggest for having a different understanding of what time is in your life. Time cannot be exchanged. Time cannot be given to someone or taken away from someone. In fact, the experience that we have of time being this bucket in which we need to fill up, and we start to feel busy when that bucket is overflowing and flows into the buckets next to it of the other hours. And whether or not you're separating those buckets by hours or by days or by years, or something that is just like a season, right? Something that's like not necessarily defined by chronos, by quantitative time keeping methods. We still recognize that there is this essential aspect that we have in our consciousness now, which is that time can be moved around and that it needs to be optimized as much as possible. And I am coming swiftly to the conclusion that that is just a load of bollocks. Like that is just not, it's not a thing. Like look at a cat, for instance, right? So Selena's here on my lap, right? Her experience is a matter, from our perspective, it's I'm going to take a nap here. I'm going to do, I'm going to go and stalk an animal here. I'm going to play with my fellow cat here. I'm going to sit on a lap now. And her life is taken in whiles, right? So that's the Old English term or the Middle English term for how long something takes. We say a while. There's a pissing while, which is self-explanatory. I think there's even a while that is like how long it takes to say a certain psalm. That's how they used to measure time. There's always been a measurement of time, whether it was before we actually had, trains and timetables and things along those lines and universal chronos, or global chronos, I should say, or if it was before that when there was still an understanding of time. I think that pulling back this understanding of time and saying, I'm exactly where I need to be at this exact moment. And there's nothing else that's there for me besides that. I'm going to perceive the change. I'm going to perceive the still moment of change. Like the be here now concept is like, I'm going to experience the stillness, whether it's by being physically still, because then the picture changes, right? The moving image changes very little. And suddenly we drop down into this higher dimension that's able to perceive the change in our lives. By watching it as if it's a moving image, by watching it as if things are going on, we start to recognize, and we can use tool as a meditative tool. We can use time as a meditative tool for dropping into those higher dimensions in which we are the observer of change in our lives. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to accomplish. There's just enjoyment of creation and our ability to create. Thanks, Al.